I emailed it just a few minutes ago, or I can share my screen.
Right, I got it. All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started with the September 7th RTPO Public Transportation Workgroup meeting. My name is Chet Parsons. I'm Director of Transportation at Planner VA. Janice Firestone is joining me, and she is manager of all things everywhere. So she's going to be taking notes and making sure that the meeting is running smoothly. It's a smaller group. Let's go ahead and do introductions, and I'll call out names and everybody can do a brief intro of who you are and who you represent. Let's start with Adrienne Torres.
Sure. Good morning. Adrienne Torres, Chief Development Officer at GRTC.
Sam Sink.
Sam Sink, Director of Planning and Scheduling at GRTC.
All right, Lisa Guthrie.
I am Lisa Guthrie. I am Executive Director of the Virginia Transit Association, and I also sit on the CTAC representing New Kent County.
Thanks, Lisa. Tiffany.
Tiffany Dubinsky with the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation.
Thanks. Joe Bidunas.
Good morning, Joe Bidunas. I am traffic engineer with Hanover County.
John O'Keefe.
John O'Keefe, Account Executive with Ride Finders.
All right, Nora Amos.
Hi, Nora Amos with the Town of Ashland.
Thanks, Nora. Gary Mitchell.
I'm Transportation Planner for Charles City County.
All right, Kelly LeDuc.
Hi, good morning. I'm Kelly LeDuc with New Kent County.
All right, Ron Spikowski.
Hi, Ron Spikowski, Tri-Cities Area MPO.
Awesome. Patricia Robinson.
Good morning, Tricia Robinson, Planning Manager at GRTC.
Okay, Ashley Austin.
Morning, this is Ashley Austin with Henrico County. I'm with Transportation Planner.
Okay, Nicole Mueller. All right, Alana McKeeman.
Hi, Alana McKeeman with Foursquare Integrated Transportation Planning.
Thanks, Alana. Matthew.
Hi, I'm also with Foursquare here with Alana.
Great. And Nick?
Hi, Nick Britton with Michael Baker International.
Thanks, Nick. Sid.
Good morning. My name is Sid. I'm with the Planner RVA's Community Engagement Coordinator.
Awesome. And it looks like Dirona just joined. Dirona, you want to give a brief intro?
Hi, everyone. Dirona Moore here with the City of Richmond.
Okay, thanks. Did I miss anybody?
We have Rhonda Russell with Charles City County who is participating, but she's been unable, I think, to move over as a panelist, so she can't speak, but just wanted to let everyone know that she is on the webinar as well.
Okay, thanks. And we have Gary here in the room, so I think we're covered. So the next item on the agenda is a public comment period. Janice, is there anyone else that's joining as a member of the public? It doesn't.
No, we don't. We have staff. We have one person that's in the webinar just as their phone number showing up, but I haven't received any message or any indication that anyone wishes to speak.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. The other item on the agenda is the GRTC microtransit planning project. And this is an update, I think, from the last meeting where we had last time we were together, we had a kind of an intro of the process and what's been going on. And this is an update. So we're excited to turn the floor over to Adrian and her team to kind of take it away.
Sure. Thank you everyone for joining us again. This is, I guess, more of a continuation, I guess, than an update. Just want to get a deeper dive into all the slides we went over last time. Alana's going to bring them back up. We want to go over each of the zones, specifically get some feedback from all the jurisdictions, especially the zones that are kind of cross-jurisdictional, and end up kind of a prioritization list. They're gonna get into that, but also want to make we are still going to be moving forward with the regional public transportation plan, kicking off that work hopefully in the next couple months, and in that we will revisit the fixed route expansion efforts. This is the microtransit look. We are also looking at, I think I mentioned last time when talking to Charles City, but looking at other alternative options as related to mobility services. So want to start those conversations soon after we kind of move forward with this into the next phase. I've already reached out to Tiffany, who's on the call with DRPT, to start that from the state level, and then we'll start talking to the jurisdictions as well as other options. If fixed route doesn't necessarily apply, of course, to all of them, hence we're here with microtransit, but if microtransit isn't necessarily kind of the fit for all the jurisdictions as well, let's continue the conversation and see what other alternatives are also out there. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Nick to start the slideshow.
All right. Thank you, Adrian. So real quick, a lot of this will be a repetition from the last meeting, but do want to just kind of go over what we are hoping to achieve with the study and on the different pieces of it. Like Adrian said, this is a study looking at specifically microtransit as one element of an entire suite of transit services and mobility options. So specifically looking at where microtransit may be beneficial, and then if we do, identify those locations, how that service would look, the parameters of the service from hours, cost, things like that. So there's two steps here. And we're sort of in that between the first and second step in identifying those locations. So we have had a fair amount of engagement both with the public and through a survey, and then meetings with the jurisdictions and providers. We've also had some continued discussions with the jurisdictions after the last meeting, and I'm sure those will continue as well. And as we're moving forward with this process, we'll definitely be coming back to all the jurisdictions where microtransit looks to be a good fit and discussing what it looks like. So there's no jumping to a definite recommendation without going through the localities at first, obviously. So the work included quantitative and qualitative analysis. There's a lot of looking at the demand for microtransit service, looking at the demographics that attract that kind of service, what kind of travel patterns, whether it's commuting trips or first mile, last mile trips, what different options work best in different places. So we're looking at kind of a whole variety of different indicators and metrics to determine quantitatively where microtransit may make sense. And then looking qualitatively at some of what other jurisdictions are doing. And Foursquare dove pretty deep into a bunch of different similar context markets for microtransit throughout the East Coast and the Midwest, and just looking at different options that may or may not work here, and what we can learn, and for good and for worse, from those communities. So like I said, we're kind of continuing, or Adrian mentioned as well, we're continuing this process from that first briefing. We've identified some top candidates for potential pilot projects, but of course we want feedback on those. We're not going to, jump to recommending these before we sort of work out some details and talk to these localities. And as we're doing that, we'll begin to, if you can work out some of those issues, then we can begin to finalize service details, and then ultimately it goes into the implementation process. So real quickly, I think everyone on the call, if I'm not mistaken, was on the last call, but microtransit is just a technology, specifically a technology-enabled on-demand public transportation service. Uber and Lyft is the best sort of baseline to start with when you're thinking about what it looks like. You basically use your phone. You can call in to make rides, but effectively, the goal is to use your phone to make a trip, and that trip would come and pick you up within a certain period of time. The big difference between an Uber and a Lyft and microtransit is that you're not guaranteed that you would be a single trip like you might be with Uber and Lyft. So it is public transit. So it does, you know, the idea is to have branded vehicles so people know what the service is, but they're not big buses rumbling through the area. They're usually smaller buses like that example you see in the bottom right corner, which is from out at city of Norton and Wise County in Southwest Virginia. And again, it is public transportation, so it's available to everyone. It's not like paratransit where there's certain restrictions on ridership. This is something that's open to anyone who wants to use it. So typically where you look to see where microtransit works, you want to look at some of the metrics that that do kind of lead to transit ridership, like low-income households and zero-car households, but also look at places where fixed route service may not be feasible because of the density of residential and jobs in that area. So there is a little different balance there when you're looking at where microtransit may work. You want to make sure that the area is active enough and has enough origins and destinations that it kind of maintains some efficiency and productivity throughout the day. Sometimes that kind of precludes very rural places. But like I said, there are examples in Virginia, even in Gloucester courthouse area, and then in Wise County, where it's fairly rural, but microtransit is flourishing. And the idea is that microtransit is very flexible and customizable service, so you can kind of tinker with things and parameters and cost and to get what works. But the real idea is that you want to make sure people understand kind of how it works, because it's most of the time it's fairly new and hasn't been used in the community. And so, for instance, in Richmond, there's not a similar type public transportation service like this, so there's a lot of marketing education that's needed as well. So today, last meeting, we went over some of the zones that we identified as potential pilot projects for further consideration, and we got some feedback from a number of the jurisdictions. So we want to continue that discussion. It's not really an update as much as it's a continuation. And we want to focus a lot on what that readiness, the element of readiness for that microtransit service, because the goal here is to identify pilot projects that can be implemented in the very near future. So, we can identify zones that may be right for microtransit maybe in 5 to 10 years, but we're looking sort of at the much shorter term here. So that's one thing that we would like everyone to keep their kind of give us their opinion on, in terms of, what does that readiness look like for those zones? Do you think, for your jurisdiction, or even if it's not your jurisdiction, do you think that's a particularly good opportunity for a pilot service? So any questions?
Yeah, I would say also the ones that are further out, what you think we need to do as far as stepwise to get us ready. If you still think it's a great zone to be considered, but it's not, let's just say, politically ready or marketing ready, what steps we should do to get it to that point in the future.
Any questions? All right, now I will turn it over to Alana.
Okay, thank you, Nick and Adrian. Again, this is kind of just a recap from last time, but just to refresh your memory, the first thing we did as part of the quantitative analysis for this study was to look at, hone in on kind of the areas where we see the most potential suitability for microtransit. So the map here is showing the darker purple are the places where we saw the highest levels of combination of population need for transit, those zero-car households, low-income households, things like that. And then kind of that sweet spot of density where it's enough to sustain productive a microtransit service, but maybe is a little too low density to have a productive fixed route service. And then we're also looking at where are the places that people actually want to get to in thinking about the right areas for microtransit service. So we looked at all three of those things and identified the darkest purple areas as kind of having the most suitability for microtransit. Using that as an input, we then held, we had stakeholder meetings and we identified 30 candidate zones for further evaluation. So kind of taking those groupings of places with suitability, plus some of that qualitative input to draw these zones that you see on the screen here. So all 30 of these candidate zones were identified. And then we did an evaluation prioritization exercise. So we actually ranked the zones based on a combination of factors, including where we saw the highest concentrations of low-income minority populations, which areas were highly residential, because we know those tend to generate more trips than other land uses. Intersection density is kind of a proxy that we use to look at whether the built environment might be more suitable for microtransit. Presence of destinations, again, in the cases where the microtransit might be geared toward connecting people to the fixed route network, we looked at connections to bus routes. And finally, we did go ahead and identify at least one zone per jurisdiction, just to make sure we were giving every location throughout the region a further look in terms of potential for microtransit. So we had these 11 zones that we identified, and Adrian was kind of hinting at this already, but just to recap, our focus today is really readiness. We think there's a lot of areas throughout the region that have potential for really productive and successful microtransit service, but we have to identify some that can be our guinea pigs and just kind of get that pilot process rolling. So when we think about readiness, and this isn't necessarily an exhaustive list, but 3 important considerations we're thinking about are, first of all, a recognized need in that community for public transportation service, and a need that's not currently being adequately met by another service. The second factor is political support. So we just want to make sure that the elected officials there and the residents actually are interested in this kind of service. That's also really important. And then one thing we learned from all of our interviews was that, a service is only as effective as the marketing and education that surrounds getting people used to it, aware of it, used to it, and comfortable with using it. So we want to make sure that there's kind of some of those local resources available to help us connect to the people in the location where the service would be provided to achieve those goals of marketing and educating people on how to use the service. So these, again, there could be others as well, but these are kind of 3 key readiness factors that we're looking at. So I'm going to walk through each of the zones that we went through last time, and I'm going to ask you all to just comment. We want this to be a good discussion on, and we understand not all of you are familiar with every pocket of the region, but those who feel comfortable commenting on, when you think about those readiness factors, what your opinion is regarding this zone's readiness for microtransit service. And again, like Adrian said, there might be an area that's really highly suitable, but maybe you think it'd be ready more like in that 2 to 3 year, 4 to 5 year range. So those are our discussion questions for today. I see there's a hand raised, so I'll pause there.
Alana, it's Lisa Guthrie. I see that you've got unmet transportation need as one of the readiness factors. Mm-hmm. How is that measured? Looking at the intended destination of a trip, for instance, access to supermarkets or grocery stores, access to medical care, access to county government. What were the factors in determining unmet transportation need? Where is it determined for the potential riders? What is their likely destination? And want to make sure that's in the zone of what you've illustrated here.
Yeah, great question. So it's really a qualitative and quantitative combination. So we've had a lot of great input from the jurisdictions on what they're hearing from people in terms of like, I live in this area and I'm trying to get here. So that qualitative is one of our sources of information. We also use a travel demand tool called Replica And so that we can draw a zone and it can tell us like how many trips would be within that area. So it does use a combination of like cell phone data and other things to figure out where people are trying to go to look at the demand within that zone. But you know, like I want to emphasize that's why we're talking to all of you today, because you all know the people that live in these locations and kind of understand the feedback you're getting in terms of where people are trying to go. We do, you know, I think as we move forward and refine the boundaries of the locations we identify as pilots, we will be looking to make sure that there is, for example, a grocery store in most of these zones, something like some of those key destinations that we know people would need to get to.
Additional question, Alana.
Sure.
Did you look at census data to determine the age groups? How many have driver's licenses? How many have single occupancy vehicles, cars? And because there's some concentration of retirees in certain places and not others, I just wondered how much of the demographics were considered in determining the zones.
Yeah, another great question. That's actually a really big part of this suitability piece that I talked about at the beginning. So when we say population need for service here, we're looking at a variety of factors that influence people's propensity to use public transportation. So we look at, like I said, low-income households, zero-car households, one-car households as well. We look at presence of youth and seniors and people with disabilities. So that all is factoring into where you see the darkness of purple here. I don't know that we looked specifically at like people having driver's licenses, for example. That's a really interesting idea we could think about. Okay. Any other questions before we go on? I do also want to add, I know some jurisdictions have sent GRTC some really great comments. They took what we shared at the last meeting and kind of provided some input about readiness for the zones in their jurisdiction as well. So this is not meant to, you know, supersede any of that, but we are just going to go through each of the zones for process sake, but we are cognizant of some of those comments that have been received already. So with that, I will jump right in. I'm going to walk through the zones in the same order I think we did them last time. So I'll show the ones that are kind of in the central areas of the region first, and then we'll look at the other ones as well. So this was our first zone here. We call this our East Highland Park and Mechanicsville zone. So this is connecting this area in southern Hanover County with northern Henrico County. And this zone is providing that connection to the Route 91. So someone could take the service to transfer to the bus to get into other locations in the region. And there's some key destinations here, medical, shopping as well, and lots of apartment complexes and other destinations. So want to kind of open those two questions to the group. Are there any thoughts on how ready this area might be for microtransit and the timing?
I would also say if you have any comments on the zone itself, if I got some initial feedback just in talking to Henrico County as far as access to the 91 with that particular zone, maybe having if you were going to do kind of the connection up to the Meadowbridge area, maybe having connections to the other routes, we'll talk to, I guess, the next slide lower, might have more access to the system opposed to just having access to the 91. So considerations for switching some of the zones, if there's any feedback on that as well. But I guess we're looking for kind of initial reactions since it's Henrico and Hanover that are directly impacted by this zone. You guys have any thoughts on it as far as readiness?
This is Joe. I don't really, I just don't have enough experience to really have a good sense of in terms of readiness. But in terms of the zone, at least the portion east of 295, I think you got the right areas there. Those are both pretty dense commercial. But I would also look to consider maybe extending that east along 360, at least through the Lee Davis intersection. There's also some pretty dense commercial nodes, a library just on the north side of 360. Yes, just kind of like, yeah, just almost just kind of a band on either side of 360 through the intersection. Those would be points of destination primarily. You're not going to be picking up riders from that area, but those would clearly be attractors or destinations.
Okay, that's an excellent comment. Thank you for that. Can take another look at that. I've got Matt's writing down all your comments, so we'll definitely circle back to that. I see another hand raised.
Hi, so I think it might be helpful in terms of thinking about readiness. This is kind of like a precursor to me talking to Adrian about some available resources at the state level. But in general, with microtransit, we've seen a lot of our microtransit pilots that Nick was mentioning in a combination of federal discretionary grants that have come through, or from the state level, we do have our demonstration grant program. And a lot of the caveats that we have with demonstration is that there needs to be a feasibility study that's been put in place prior to you applying for your demo. GRTC has already done excellent work in terms of a microtransit study. So if for any of our localities that may be thinking that, you know, this is the right zone or maybe something of that nature, and they would like to partner with GRTC, there's an opportunity to apply for funding, and it's an 80% state, 20% local match. That's the component for demo. So I wanted to just kind of put that out there that if you think this is something that you may want to prioritize and see it move forward, there are avenues at the state level that we can support. I also know right now our transit ridership incentive program is doing a mid-cycle application. In typical regional routes, we've been advertising it more as either commuter or express routes, but microtransit actually could be a viable option as well. And I'm working with the program manager, Lauren Magnato, about maybe finding some better parameters, because we want people to apply for these funds. And so in these cases where they're, you know, like between a couple of jurisdictions within the Richmond region, if there's a zone that kind of branches or there's a couple of zones, there is also an opportunity that you can apply for something with microtransit through that program. So I just wanted to put that out there in terms of the conversation and also technical assistance. So if you're thinking that you may want to dig a little deeper into some more zones off of what you see out of the study, there's technical assistance and there's other opportunities that either with DRPT or even with the TPO that we can explore to help you out. So I just want to preface that saying that there are opportunities that we can do it if you're, you know, if you're thinking within a year all the way out to the outer years of 5 years, but there are options to implement that if you're not 100% sure about the either political support or the resources, we do have that available for you.
Thanks, Tiffany. Great comment.
Joe, do you have any, I guess hearing what Tiffany kind of describes as far as readiness and additional support opportunities. And of course, we do have CVTA funds that have been approved to do a deeper dive into these in the next year as well. That zone, do you see it being, I guess, politically supported, and or do we need to kind of put steps in place to look at it in more details, as well as kind of do an engagement rollout to, I guess, see if people are interested in it?
I'm reluctant really to kind of speak on the politics of it, but I will say this, that one of the supervisors, because I think that area touches several districts, but one of the supervisors for that area has inquired on multiple occasions about, you know, microtransit for kind of the less urban areas of the region. And so I said I wasn't going to speak to this, but would probably be supportive, I would think.
Okay.
But it's hard to, you know, it's hard to really tell. I think it would be viewed as a service, and I think it would be supported.
Okay, so there's interest in, at least in Hanover County, and having the conversations.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay. Can we also discuss kind of the comment that Henrico had mentioned when we had to talk to them, and Ashley, you can talk to it more if you would like, but I think there was having the connections. If you want to go down to the next slide, I'm kind of going to just go back and forth a little bit. Yeah, this one. So there's, if you see kind of that tip over there on the northeast section, that's, I believe, Meadow Bridge, that also goes into that same zone if it were to continue. The comment was that having access from that zone rather than going in the Mechanicsville area would actually be more fruitful as far as having that fixed route connections. So at some point, this will also connect the Route 1 going up further north to all the development that's happening there related to green cities and eventually further north as well, as we get into discussions with north-south. So if any thoughts on kind of prioritizing this having connection to Hanover versus the other zone that we want to go back up again? And as far as like how are people traveling today? Where are their destinations? Would it be helpful in terms of jobs? There is a slight connection to the Amazon facility, which we don't know what the demand is today since it's not open, but having access to jobs there and further access to the rest of the system. Just not that they couldn't eventually all be connected, but just kind of prioritizing those connections in the short term. This would also impact city accessing that, going into regional thought of going eventually to Hanover, people in Hanover having access to the city.
I'll speak up really quickly, just say thank you, Adrian, for bringing this to the group's attention. Our comment that we talked about with you, I think it was last week, maybe. But yeah, we, from a standpoint, are thinking connection to the Amazon facility and then 93, 91, all the others, fixed routes over there is definitely a priority for us. Readiness factors for us, I mean, this would have political support, I believe. And I believe it would be ready for implementation within a year. And the 93, as you know, we've talked about potentially letting that go if we have this microtransit area service this area, because it's not a very efficient route as it currently is. But that's all things we already talked about in our meeting and separately. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that this would have political support and probably be ready for implementation within a year.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on either of these two zones that are, there's kind of the one we've drawn here, the one over here, but the option for different connections? I see there's a question in the chat about whether the Amazon facility is confirmed. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if anyone else does.
Henrico, can you comment on that? I haven't had any updates specifically.
To my knowledge, yes, it is confirmed. It is happening. So I haven't heard otherwise.
And this is John with Ride Finders. I was actually on a call last Friday with Amazon, and we talked about that facility. And just like Ashley said, it's still a go.
Great, thank you. All right, well, I will charge forward so we can try to get through all the zones, but just stop me if any comment, if there are any more comments. We kind of talked about this one as well. This is the one where the Amazon facility is going. The next one is this one we're calling North Chesterfield West. Again, I know Chesterfield sent some comments as well that we'll be looking at, but did want to see if there was any other thoughts on readiness for this particular zone and timing.
Is there anyone from Chesterfield?
I'm not sure.
Barb had resent some comments, so I forwarded those right before the meeting too, so we can kind of go through those.
Okay.
Everyone.
Got it, thank you. And I think she had some comments on this zone as well, so we'll circle back to those. If this group doesn't have any more on this one, it's also in Chesterfield. We can move on to our zone we're calling the SANDSTON-ELKO zone. So this one is providing a connection to the Route 7 here on the far west end. And you can see there's some key destinations: grocery shopping, social security office, and healthcare in this zone as well. And so yeah, want to see if any folks in New Kent or Henrico have comments on this zone's readiness.
Trying to determine what food line it is, but it looks like, I'm not sure exactly where that route is. You've got it going north a good bit from New Kent Highway. So can you blow that up a little bit?
It's like I can.
Okay.
Looks like there's two arrows here. I'm not actually sure
Okay.
which one that is. Maybe Matt can give it a check.
Looks like it goes quite a bit up Dispatch Road. I think that's what that is, Lisa.
There are two food lines in that location, one on each side of 64. One used to be a Hannaford grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
I know the area. And the other one is a food line from years ago.
Thank you.
There's a couple of, restaurants in there. So, there is a medical office on 60. It looks like maybe you've captured that. Not just the VCU, but there's also a medical doctor's office on 60 near the Park and Ride, right across the 60 from the Park and Ride. Yeah, looks like you got that. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Anywhere you see a plus sign, that's a medical destination.
Okay. Kelly, do you see anything else?
Something's goofy with my audio, so I'm trying not to talk too much, but no, it looks like that's the spot where we've been hearing about a need for years, and it looks really good.
Great. That's very helpful to know you've been hearing about that need.
As far as support for that, would you say that it could be ready, I guess, if we did the proper engagement within the next year, or a little bit more time for engagement and determination?
Well, I would say it probably would be ready and supported within the next year. We've got a lot of population going in over there, and that Park and Ride is always jam-packed.
Okay.
If there's any way to improve the Park and Ride, which is beyond the scope of this group, but anyway, that Park and Ride is often overflowing, and people are parking in nearby parking lots for private businesses.
This is Patricia from New Kent. I know that the Park and Ride, we submitted to expand the Park and Ride over on 60.
Right.
Because of the same reasons that you stated, Ms. Guthrie. And so I do know that at one time they were also picking up people at the food line on 60 as well.
Yeah. Maybe make sure that both food lines are in that zone, the 60 and the 249.
I think it's both of them.
Yeah.
What about the food line on this in Providence Forge on 60? At one time, people were parking there, and it's not the caravan, but I know they were commuting up to the Bottoms Bridge Park and Ride as well.
Was that Ride Finders, John?
I don't know, it was Ride Finders or VDOT, something like that.
Yeah, some of them, Lisa, I think were kind of getting pushed out because as everybody said, that one was small. I had seen some renderings for that, and I'll reach out to somebody, Lisa, at
Okay.
VDOT and see about that. Because I thought they were going to do that fairly soon, but I'll reach out to my contact there and I can shoot you an email when I hear something. But a lot of the Ride Finders vans that were departing from Bottoms Bridge were coming from there, but I think some of them maybe were going to some of the food lines and stuff. But I know that they talk with the management group before they park there, so they don't just park there and not ask. So they have permissions to do so.
Okay.
I have one that I have a schematic for I-64 Bottoms Bridge from VDOT.
Okay.
Trying to see if I have a date. It says construction is scheduled for fall, winter 2024.
You blinked out a little, Adrian. What was the date?
It says fall, winter 2024 tentative.
Okay.
I see the
Yeah, it's
expansion.
a small area, so they can only expand it so much because of the triangle that it's in.
Yeah, it looks like it's expanding to 91 spots.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it is today.
I've seen some stakes. I don't know what that's for, but I've seen some stakes on the perimeters. Maybe that's to survey what the expansion would be.
And so these are primarily used by, is it Vanpool today?
We've had van pools come from there. I think maybe we have one coming from there. You know, when I drive by there, I see a lot of other people, I think, you know, like construction workers and things like that, and people parking there that are, you know, maybe, you know, going somewhere. But I mean, it is heavily used, as everybody has said.
Okay. Is anyone else, I guess, familiar with exactly where they're going?
I think it's just informal carpools primarily. They're probably going to work. I don't know.
But they're doing their own carpools to go probably downtown.
I'm guessing. I don't really know. Yeah.
Okay. Because what VDOT originally reached out about was asking if people were going downtown and if it was demand for an express route and if they needed to retrofit it to accommodate that. Can circle back on that later. Okay, well, it sounds like it's heavily utilized. All right, so that one.
I don't know unless someone was out there a couple of days monitoring. I don't know how it would be determined if they were just carpools. I know sometimes I've seen contractors' vehicles, and I've seen, I guess, employees going in and getting in the pickups or the vans so that they weren't identified as ride finders or, you know, those kind of modes of transportation. So I think it just became an informal carpool parking lot.
Okay.
I mean, Bay Transit bus is never there. You know, I don't see that there. You know, the times that I pass by in the mornings.
Interesting. Okay. I would be interested to see if we could maybe do some sort of survey to find out where people are going, if there could be something. And microtransit is one, but is there something else that would also be beneficial?
Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like that's a good one to keep on the priority one. How about from Henrico's side? Because I mean, it's connected to Henrico to make that work for the larger zone. You have any, I guess, thoughts on that, Ashley?
Yeah, I think this zone is good, and I like that it connects the 7 to other parts of the county. Readiness wise, this would have political support, and it's meeting an unmet need. I think so. I like this one, and probably would be ready for implementation within a year.
Okay.
Okay, I'll jump to our next one now. So this is the, initially we had one zone here for the short pump area. After looking at the population here and just the amount of activity, we realized really needs to be more than one zone to be able to serve it productively. So we had divided the north, south, and east zones. I think we felt the north was the one that, like, quantitative wise in terms of population need, we saw the most demand. And just want to see what the thoughts are on readiness for, particular for the north part, but really any of that zone. And again, I know some comments have been sent about this separately as well, but.
Yeah, I'll speak up. So we met with Adrian to discuss this a little, but we would like to see more inclusion for the Innsbruck area. We think that could be better connected somehow. So without the Innsbruck area, I'm not sure how strong of a zone this might be. We just really are interested in having Innsbruck connected a little bit more than what it is currently shown. As far as readiness, this one may not have as strong political support as the other two zones we've looked at in the county. So it's something to think about. And so because of that, it may not be ready for implementation within a couple of years or so.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay. If there's no other comments on this one, then I'll move on. I know we have someone from Ashland here today. So this was the zone that we had identified in Hanover County for the Ashland area, really encompassing a lot of that central part of Ashland there, combination of shopping destinations as well as the college. And we did see a pretty decent amount of demand for this zone, so we were recommending that one for fairly long service hours. So thoughts on readiness for this zone?
Hi, it's Nora. This is a project that we studied and tried to move forward with back in 2008. And we thought we had some of the demo funds for a 3-year project, but as you all may or may not recall, 2008 was a time when all the money started going away. And so we've never really explored seriously getting back to that, but listening to Tiffany and hearing that those funds may still be available, we'd very much like to continue the conversation on this. As far as marketing, definitely we're ready for that. I think it is something that could happen within a year and that there is community support for.
Great. Perfect. All right. There's any other comments on this one, speak up. Otherwise, I will jump to this next one. So this is one that's in Goochland County. Definitely a more rural area here, but we've tried to include some key destinations, including the community college and Food Lion for some shopping as well. This is one where we didn't see quite as high a number of trips per hour, so we were recommending this for kind of a more standard service day ending at 7 p.m. Any thoughts on readiness for this area? Oops, sorry.
Is Goochland on? Anyone from Goochland?
Okay.
Back up with them.
Okay. This next one then is in central Powhatan. So a lot of the destinations in Powhatan are concentrated in that central part of the county, and this zone is trying to capture most of those. And I think we had extended it originally based on some feedback from the county. But any thoughts on readiness for a microtransit type circuit service? And this would again be without the connections to the fixed route. This would be more for internal circulation, so people just serving those local trips. So thoughts on readiness in this area?
Yeah, I think that covers where most of our retail, medical, institutional uses are located. So I think the footprint is right. So yeah, we're exploring, locally. Met with some of the folks from Hanover Dash, and a program like that we feel like could have some opportunity here. yeah, I think readiness is good for it. And there'd be, political support. Budget-wise, I'm not sure. We haven't programmed all of our CVTA funds. So I think there could be political support.
Okay.
So Brett, you see in the next year for that one?
As far as the timeline when it would be ready for implementation.
Correct. Yeah.
I think that would be realistic.
Okay, great. And then this zone was our Providence Forge Ruthville zone, mostly in Charles City County here. I know there was a mention about a destination on 60 previously. Thoughts on readiness for this area?
Probably within 1 to 2 years. That's what I would guess.
Okay.
I just became the transportation planner for the county, so I'm just getting my feet wet getting into all this. But I think the region, the things you picked out are sufficient in terms of locations. I do think there probably is a need, because the county has a plan, or we're in the process of developing a more detailed plan, but a plan for Route 106, which is Roxbury Road, and there's an industrial park there, and that directly connects to New Kent 64 as well as the Hopewell and Petersburg area. So that's kind of like the growth center for the county. That's where we identify growth to go. So I think maybe if you can pick up it, there's other than the industrial park, there's not a lot there. We did just get a new food line. A Dollar General store, which is a larger format store than what they normally build up there. So there is potential in terms of future growth along that corridor.
Okay.
What about extending the zone to the Providence Forge food line? Is that something that was considered?
That's a good question.
I think that would be, yes, I think it would be worth further study.
Okay. I'll definitely note that down. Okay.
The issue that came up at our last meeting had to do with CVTA funds and making sure that the rural areas in New Kent and Charles City that currently utilize Bay Transit would not be left to use their own funds for Bay Transit and not receive any services from the CVTA to offset what they're paying for. So I know there's been some additional conversations between Bay Transit and GRTC, but I hope there's more of an opportunity to work together on that so that there would be more political support from both counties.
Yeah, I did talk to Bay Transit. It was a great conversation. I just wanted to hear how their service was going since they've already implemented microtransit. I was heard positive things about it, which is great, and interested to kind of keep them in the conversation as we move forward with this.
I think some type of partnership, a cooperative agreement between everybody would be great.
Perfect. Okay, well, I think we've covered the zones that we had, but definitely don't want to limit things there. If there's any other thoughts on readiness or the zones, we'll welcome that as well.
One thing that just general comment, in Spotsylvania County, I used to be up that way a number of years ago, but they have FRED, which is their regional transit authority out of Fredericksburg. And of course, this doesn't directly tie into what we're talking about here, but it could in terms of developing future routes. FRED had a program at that time, 15 years ago when I was up there, but they had a program where a developer could partner with FRED, and that often got put into the proffer package or the transportation package or the rezoning so that they could reduce their traffic impact, reduce other impacts in terms of traffic and their development. Part of that was that the commercial part of the development would have a transit stop built for Fred to come in there and pick people up or drop people off. So just something to kind of put in the back of your mind to think about, and for everybody else as well, to think about putting something like that in development policy.
Great. Well, Adrian, I'll turn it over to you. If there's any last.
Sure. I think this was very, very helpful to get all the feedback from the jurisdictions, getting a better understanding of what microtransit is, but will continue to be a learning process. I will reach out to the jurisdictions who may have not been on the call. I know we already got Chesterfield's feedback, but kind of go over with them in the same context of center priorities, but not necessarily the readiness from them. And then also the GOOCHLAND. Was it the only two that weren't on the call? Okay. So I think what we could do, Alana, is maybe come up with a matrices and put them in like the 1 year, 2 to 3, and kind of go through the ones that are in the near term, what steps need to happen to get there. Most likely I'm working on a scope for the phase 2 to figure out what's the best implementation steps for it. And then also in the scope could be, how do we get the other ones ready if the zones have been identified and supported, not necessarily for year 1, but for the out years, and working on engagement as well as funding opportunities to get those in. All right. So after I have those additional conversations with the jurisdictions, maybe we can kind of do a report out of synopsis back to this group one more time. Is that all right with everybody? And then it will start kind of conversations at our board level, and then move it up to kind of the policy board level as well, so they can see what the findings were with the support, if they agree with the support, and then we can kind of move forward with the phase 2 and see if we can make some of these pilots happen. All right.
Sounds good. Thanks, Adrian.
Yeah.
Going back to the agenda, that's the extent of what we had planned to talk about today. Does anybody else, before we log off, does anyone else have any comments, suggestions, requests for this work group? All right, well, this is really exciting. I'm glad we had such a great turnout, and looking forward to seeing the synopsis and kind of following up one more time. And we'll work with GRTC and the team to figure out possible dates for a third call related to this project, and either send out a doodle poll or we'll figure it out. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today, and we look forward to continuing this conversation soon. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.